Hey, good people, how you doing? Well, it's been quite a while since we did the Time Out podcast. It's something that me, Michael Kwambo, I do with Richard Wanjohi. What a way to introduce ourselves, either just gone off the grid in terms of how to introduce each other. Well, this is the second episode of Time Out. It's a podcast that literally just looks at other things happening in the world of sport. And Richie, this week. Or in this episode, because let's not say this week, we'll be committing ourselves to shoot another episode next week. We are talking about harnessing digital and social media in sport. And maybe just to steal into your introduction, you recently did the Sport Tech Africa Summit, and I'm sure you harnessed things like tech. Maybe you can start by telling us about that before we go into the topic that we're talking about, digital and social media in sport.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michael, for the quick introduction. Richard, my name is Richard, coming all the way from the 254. It's been a minute. I know we had promised to do this more often, but as they say, we get busy and life happens. So back to your question and query on the Sports Tech event that we had in about a month ago. So the conversation has been ongoing about what happens in this ecosystem, and especially from a Kenyan and African perspective. And we felt that it is important that we focus on things that we hope to disrupt in the next coming years. So one of the areas that we felt was that low-hanging fruit was sports and the use of technology. This is both from a user or player perspective, but also from a fan engagement and all, and eventually integrating this into the game. This is a very interesting conversation because we domicile this within an academic institution and invited across players from across the divide, from the continent, from Europe. We also had a few people from America, and this was a very interesting conversation.
Great. I'm sure that was a great conversation, like you said, and I caught snippets of it on social media. Would have loved to be there physically, but hey, there's always going to be a next time. So we're going to jump into what we wanted to talk about. Let's look at it this way. We live in a world, where from athletes to brands, coaches to fans, social media has fundamentally altered the playing field. How do you leverage these tools to create meaningful engagement and lasting impact into society, into your audiences? And that's what we're getting into. And again, before we talk about those strategies, I'll probably take you back to the history, how it was back in the day. How did digital and social media take over the sports world? Richie, you and I think right now they'll call us we're fossils. We'd like to call ourselves Gen X or something, but let's kubali, we're fossils. And yes, we are old enough to remember the way sport was in the early 2000s. That must have been around 20 years ago. The onset of the English Premier League. It was coming really to compete with the National Basketball Association, NBA. And if you recall, sports back then was still mostly consumed through TV, radio, and print media. Fans would tune in to catch live games, read game recaps in the newspaper, or maybe visit a few fan forums. Now, let's fast forward to today. A lot has shifted to platforms like Instagram, X, which is formerly Twitter, YouTube, and even TikTok. Athletes have also become their own broadcasters, sharing behind-the-scenes context, training routines, and personal stories. Think about people like LeBron James, Serena Williams, or closer to home, Ferdinand Omanyala. They are not just athletes. These guys have become content creators. Their social media profiles allow them to build brands, connect with millions of fans, and even promote, in some cases, causes that they care about. Teams leagues, most notably for me, the English Premier League and the NBA. And also on Facebook, I follow the Indian Soccer League, ISL. Those guys are big in India. And they're creating more content than ever to engage their audiences, whether it's live tweeting, sharing highlight reels on Instagram, or posting interactive polls. Digital media has changed the way fans connect with their favorite sports.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and thanks for giving that. In fact, you've given such a broad picture. I think it's important we sort of try and make sense of it. And as you say, this started way back, okay, for our present system, because if we look at from a historical perspective, I think way back when athletes were running in the 1896, if we start with the modern Olympics, 1896, they moved from running from barefoot to highly specialized footwear. I remember I was reading up a place where they say that Jesse Owens was given his first spikes or well-done shoes at the 1936 Olympic Games. So if we start from such, going way back into how technology or sports and technology started integrating or rather intersecting, we can say that in the modern days, this has started in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And as you say, it started with the Europeans and the Americans. So if you look at the European developed leagues, like for example the EPL, Scottish League, and also the major leagues in Germany and Spain and Italy, they started with a very good way of tracking their players, seeing how they're performing on the pitches. But over and above that, these players and these teams have become brands by themselves. So you're leveraging on that conversation. So from moving from just player engagement to team engagement, all the way to the sport engagement. I think we have seen this, and especially from a football perspective, the use of video-assisted refereeing, very controversial decisions that have come across that. And, that technology is still evolving as we talk about this. If you go back to the Americas, the NBAs, the NFLs, very big on technology. One from recording players, recording statistics, giving the numbers on the go, that now we are able to say, okay, how much, how much time are the players putting in? What are the efforts that the team is putting in? I was reading somewhere, where they're talking about LeBron James and these top players. I think Ronaldo as well. They're spending up to $1 million in a year just to improve their performances by using technology. One, to track their performance. Secondly, to give their body enough rest, and also just get back to performance, enhancing their performances. So the use of technology and sports, those are two. That's something that has come. The intersection and the bond has become closer, and we'll keep seeing that going forward.
Nice. Now, Richie, let's talk about strategy. For athletes, sports people, sports organizations, social media can be a double-edged sword. Trust you me, I know it from all my years in working at the Kenya Rugby Union. Used correctly, you can build a strong personal brand. You can increase sponsorship opportunities and create direct connections with fans. But used recklessly, it can lead to controversy, PR disasters, or even damage the careers of some. And maybe just in terms of the PR disasters, I'll zero into Kenya and what I see with our football clubs in particular, and in the Kenyan Premier League. You see sometimes the leading clubs away from, and I dare say this, away from AFC Leopards, Gor Mahia, and Tusker. Those ones, there's a responsibility in the way that they handle their communications platforms. But some of these other clubs that are emerging onto the local Kenyan football scene use it more like a banter page. And you cringe at the content. I'm not saying that I want to take away the fun, but, be smart in how you go about it. And then recently, we do recall the Harambee Stars losing to Cameroon. I'm sure you watched that game where the Harambee Stars goalkeeper conceded what in the eyes of many was a soft goal. and then went ahead to post a comment on his social media platform, which really seemed to be insensitive and tended to incense the guys who watched the game, the fans of the Harambee Stars. So, with those things in mind, what strategies, can guys use to harness digital and social media?
So thanks, Mike, for highlighting that. And I think this is one aspect that we need to be very cognizant about, and we need to be very deliberate about. Technology, and especially the digital content that we create, or digital media that has become quite integral in the way we consume sports, but also participate in sports. One is that it's always an intersection between yourself as a sports person, the fans, and the general public. So we have to be very aware of what we're doing, of what we're saying. And I think you alluded to this when you mentioned that game that, Harambee Stars, or our national team, that participated in, and we had one of the players, giving such careless statements and seeming like you don't care. Whatever little information that you share, remember, the internet does not forget. So if you're not going to be very cognizant of the fact that I'm going to share this information, and that information is going to impact not just myself but those people around me, it's even best that you don't even engage in that platform. But what can we do as as a nation, as people in this space? One, it's recognize the power of these digital platforms. Just the other day, we saw what happened when Cristiano Ronaldo opened his YouTube channel. I think it was one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing platform, rather YouTube channel up until that time. And that's because he knows the power that he can, that he possesses with, propagating or pushing his content in such platforms. He knows that he's about to end his playing days. So what does he do? He decides to open this digital platform so that he's able to impart some of the knowledge and some of the things that he's going through. Secondly, these platforms increase the accessibility and engagement, not just with ourselves, but also with our fans. Because either you're live streaming or creating content on the regular, giving highlight reels either for the game and also just snippets of the game, but also interacting with the fans, because every so often, and I think we have seen this from very, prominent players, you say that today I'm doing a 1 hour session with my fans just to engage them, so that they dehumanize, or they sort of, see you in your human element, and that way they'll be able to connect with you better. But then you're not able to, leverage such platforms, then it becomes a bit of a difficult conversation. Over and above that, as a sportsman, as I said, and let me not go too far, someone like Omanyala, because you are one of the best athletes on the continent and sprinters across the world. How can you leverage that, those numbers that you have on those digital platforms, to be able to get sponsorship opportunities, brand and local and international brand collaborations? And I love what he's doing. Already is engaging big brands like Visa. They did a very good job with him when going to the Olympics, Isuzu, and also just giving that relevance to these brands and localizing that.
Great. And I was also thinking, probably this coming from my experience, having worked in sports, things like authenticity, you talked about it, content variety and interactivity and, fan engagement. When we go to authenticity, for example, fans want to see the real person behind the athlete. So, it gets down to sharing authentic moments, like you said, whether it's your pre-game rituals, downtime with family, or even your struggles or setbacks. I think that can create a deeper connection with their audience. Look at the NBA's Giannis Ante. Giannis, his second name is quite a mouthful for me. When he shared his humble background, it just won him more adoration, more fans. And then the tennis player Naomi Osaka, when she talked about her mental health challenges, it humanized her, it humanized them, it made them more relatable beyond just their athletic performance. And to digress a bit around mental health, I read an article recently about the suffering that is going on within the Kenyan athletics fraternity. Many athletes suffering from mental health challenges as a result of various issues, many of them, being caught for doping challenges and everything. Those issues are not the end of the world. I do recall very vividly Asbel Kiprop crying out on social media for the entire duration of his ban that he was innocent of the charges, and probably if he could have turned that energy into something else. But hey, that is a ship that already sailed. And then when we talked about, I think you also mentioned it, content variety. Like we said, athletes need to share more than just their game highlights. Training videos, have a Q&A with fans, give a shout out to fans, and even, for example, have collaborations with brands or influencers to help keep content fresh and engaging. But also, when you're collaborating, reaching these brands and influencers, that's another income, that is going to come your way, because your life on the track, your life on the pitch, it's limited to a certain number of years. And I like what Omanyala is doing, like you already mentioned, and he is someone who will be able to transition into a life beyond the track. Also, Eliud Kipchoge, towards the tail end of his career, is in partnerships with the likes of Techno, with the likes of Isuzu, and you see, it's an easy way to stay visible when you're away from the field of play at that point in time when you can no longer compete against your peers. And then, like you said, also Richie, interactivity and fun engagement. Platforms like Instagram stories or X, they offer a whole range of interactive tools: polls, quizzes, Q&A sessions, live video chats. I'd like to see a scenario where we have more of our athletes, particularly in Kenya, engaging directly with their fan base. When athletes, even federations, we're so centered on athletes, but also let's think about federations. When athletes and federations and teams respond to fan questions or acknowledge their loyal followers, you're building a community, a loyal community for that matter.
I couldn't agree more with you. And let's start from that community level. If you look at both major, sports brands that we've talked about previously in more developed markets, for example, the EPL and also the NBA, they're very, very huge on digital engagement, right from the way they, curate their content before the season, as they're about to kick off the season, even during the season, like there is no time that you'll not find them busy. Interesting enough is that even without doing the normal English language, I find, for example, these European clubs like Roma FC, I think they even have a local or rather Twitter handle that does Kiswahili or Swahili content, because they want to connect with their African or Swahili fans around the continent. So that tells you the power of this, these platforms. And that's something, as you say, has to be cognizant right from the federation level, then now cascaded to the teams and down to the players. If we are able to do that, one, it will drive a lot of, engagement from the, grassroots. And if you look at most of the community teams that we have, even in Kenya or across the region, a good example is what has happened in Tanzania, Yanga, Simba FC, big clubs that are big in the Eastern, or rather in the Tanzanian market, but now they've become such giants in the East African region that they're commanding, numbers and sponsorship deals that are worth their salt. Secondly, you have a very youthful generation across the continent. These are people who are mobile fast, digital natives. So if you're able to engage them with those platforms, beyond just them engaging with the sport, they'll be able to engage with the team or engage with your players, and that way they'll feel that connectivity. Finally, you will also be able to leverage this data to, both for performance, but also for marketing reasons, because any brand that sees the numbers, if I show you the numbers and I'm able to prove that these are my numbers, then I'll always get room or a chair in the conversation.
Great, and I think we're still stuck on engagement. I'd like to take you back to 12 years ago, must have been 10, 11 years ago. Kenya Harlequin was sponsored by Cadbury through their brand Lunch Bar, and they became known as Lunch Bar Queens because Cadbury bought the naming rights for Kenya Harlequin. The reason I still occasionally, when I go to the store, the supermarket, and I have a sweet tooth, the reason I will always go for Lunch Bar is because of that sponsorship. Because literally it was there, and they sold all the attributes that it's macho for you as a rugby guy. This is the chocolate bar, gives you energy and all, and it's still a chocolate bar. Kumbe, we didn't know that we're adding calories, but that's a story for another day. The whole thing is that there was a brand loyalty that came from that. Then also Mumias Sugar and AFC Leopards before Mumias collapsed. I mean, going to the supermarket, it was not a question. I see Mumias, I associate it with AFC Leopards. So for me, buying it, I'm actually buying it to support my team. It has also happened in rugby with the Menengai products and with the Cabras products. I mean, much as they've been rivals to the teams I played for, but the thing is that because we're in one ecosystem and you're like, hey, I want to see these guys do well. So when I'm in the supermarket and I see, hey, there's Cabras and something, I'm actually buying to promote their brand. I'm making profit for the owners, yes, but you see, they've gotten to me in such a way that engagement has been so simple and so subtle, and you've got me hooked on to. I can follow Cabras Sugar, I can follow Nakuru RFC, and I can also use their projects. That's just an example, and maybe now as we're coming towards the tail end, and we look at how teams and brands can use social media to drive engagement, because we are in a day and age where it's no longer individual athletes who are benefiting from digital and social media. Teams, leagues, and brands are also playing a major role, and it would be nice to hear your thoughts, Richard.
Let me give you one also from my side. I think one of the biggest brands that I always associated with the sport was Marlboro Safari Rally. And for the longest time, I never associated it with smoking. But the minute, we unpacked and, we got to know that the Marlboro was, a cigarette or a tobacco manufacturing company, I think they even got knocked off the sponsorship. And that's when, social marketing became very, big around this part of the world, that you cannot do tobacco or alcohol products for certain sports. But back to you and how we need to engage our sportsmen, or utilize the digital media to be able to push our narrative. I think one of the ways that we can do this is using the same platforms, or using these platforms, to be able to promote our talent. I see a lot of clips being shared either on TikTok or YouTube Shorts, or even on Instagram. Some of those platforms, instead of just wasting time just posting negative information, you can use them to propel your performances. We had Julius Yego, who trained on YouTube, and he was able to use his skill and become a world beater. If we can push similar narratives or similar talents, it's just a mobile phone or a mobile device, and be able to record this and share this across the globe. Right now, because of the way the information age is happening or has happened, this is an equalizer. The technology is an equalizer, and these platforms do the same. Secondly, streaming a lot of this information, or streaming these games on these platforms. I have seen a lot of these streaming platforms. I think what do you call it? Netflix, Peacock. I think there's also this other one, I'm forgetting the name, Showmax. There are quite a number of them that have bought into TV rights. What does that tell you? Or rather, more specifically, sports rights. It's because they know the scale or the magnitude of information and the audiences they'll command using these platforms. So how do you do it as a league, or as a team, or as an individual? Your content, and also be able to leverage those numbers for you to get a deal. If you look at, for example, what the NBA has done, or even the World Athletics, they have been able to negotiate very attractive and lucrative deals for the athletes to be featured on these platforms. Using that, then they're able to remunerate and pay these athletes very well. If you remember the Olympics, this was the first time that the World Athletics paid gold medalist, silver medalist, and bronze medalist across the different competitions at an Olympics. Because previously it was just a gold medal and maybe a token of appreciation, some small money. But the World Athletics took it deliberately to pay these athletes so that they may be able to motivate them. What we are saying is that all these platforms, they're giving athletes, teams, and sports franchises opportunities to be able to leverage their worth and be able to get their money's worth back and be able to engage their audiences even better.
Absolutely. Maybe just to add, because, I see that you've talked about real-time content, storytelling, and, fan-generated content. Maybe just going to real-time content, you do recall the 2022 FIFA World Cup. That was the first time I saw FIFA really revitalized. They really harnessed on digital media, because one of the biggest advantages of digital media is speed, where you can deliver real-time updates, injury reports, score updates, and even live game coverage. And you actually give meaning to your Facebook account, to your X account, to your Instagram account, to your TikTok account. FIFA utilized these platforms to share highlights and fan reactions, and they kept global audiences glued to their feeds. And they have actually joined the likes of World Rugby, World Athletics, in just changing the whole narrative around sport, because previously sport was a pastime, but now it's viewed as entertainment. And you even see, like in more developed countries, people now band together sport and entertainment. And then, like you said about the storytelling and the documentaries, good example is that very popular series that everybody saw around the world on Netflix about Michael Jordan, The Last Dance. That shows the power of storytelling in sport. Now let's come back home. I'm sure there are so many wonderful stories with our local athletes, even within the region. And for example, how somebody got converted from playing basketball into rugby and the whole journey. And these are things that can, build new audiences, build new fan bases, and keep the sport growing, and also keep the sport, the federations and the teams in a place where they're able to derive incomes that could even see them turn into profitable entities.
And then, thanks for mentioning that. I think you reminded me of the CAF African Cup of Nations that was held in Cote d'Ivoire earlier this year. If you look at the magnitude of numbers that tournament was able to command, I think CAF outdid itself. First of all, they were able to get very lucrative TV rights by selling their rights across different TV channels, but also streaming channels. That way, they were able to go intercontinental. So we had channels all the way in the Latin Americas, the Asian subcontinent, but also parts of Europe and North America, pushing the African Cup of Nations. Secondly, they were able to open up their channels. I think the TikTok channel was the fastest growing within that period between January and February when that tournament was held. And that way, then they were able to keep their fans engaged. Third, I think then they were able to command enough sponsorship that they were able to pay the teams better prize money. And that's something that has been, an ongoing conversation. If we can be able to sell this, our tournaments and our teams at a continental level, what can we do if then now we prop this up both from a country level and a regional level? Because then if you have your Simbas of this world, you have your AFCs of this nation, if you have your, Kampala FC from Uganda, we have the Africa Cup of Nations coming up in 2027. If we can start pushing this content deliberately and be able to get conversations going, rivalries, city libraries, talking about the three countries in different cultures, common language, just giving a different flavor to it, we will be among the first. In fact, I think it's the first time that the the tournament will be held by 3 nations. I think previously we had 2 countries hosting it. This will be the first that will be held in 3 countries. And both as a continent, we can be proud of this and prop it up even better. I think the other thing that I want to note is that, from a media perspective, is that the broadcast that we knew traditionally, your TV, your radio, a lot of that has been broken down, and we have our own content. We wouldn't be doing this in traditional days. We would have to either sit up with a TV interviewer or a TV station so that they're able to push our content. This has been liberalized, that I can decide to pick my own content, I can make my own content, and everyone can consume it across the world. That is something that we have to be cognizant about. Information in the digital platforms have democratized how we share this information. Let's take advantage of that in sports.
Absolutely. And for me, I think I'll close by saying that digital and social media have reshaped the sport landscape. They've given athletes, teams, federations, and brands the tools to connect to their audiences like never before. Whether it's through storytelling, fan engagement, or the latest digital trends, the future of sport going forward will be heavily influenced by how well they can harness these platforms. And Richie, that's a wrap for today's episode of Timeout. I'm sure we will meet up for another one. I think it's been a good, engaging session, short and sharp.
Indeed, and we look forward to sharing even more content. And we welcome any conversations, any feedback, any issues that people would want us to talk about. I think it's time to tell our story. Africa, we have been very cognizant that we don't share these stories. It's important that we share our stories. We can level and we can compete at a global level, and this is our time. Thanks, Mike.
Great, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.